Hello and welcome to this recording to accompany the COVID-19 setup steps for UK Furlough and Job Retention Scheme as published on the Sage People customer community under the COVID-19 discussion group. We are going to look at a number of steps today, managing employment reason statuses. We're going to be adding a new value to a pick list there, creating an absence rule so that we can track shielding effectively when we are logging absences, creating a furlough employment status, looking at start and end dates for that, enabling access for WX for employees who may be on furlough and can't use single sign-on effectively, and modifying WX for people who are on furlough, including the use of targeted communications. Quite a bit to go through there, so some of these I will demonstrate and some of these I will talk through. So we're going to now go into the demonstration and you'll see we are straight into a Lightning screen, which is showing my team members tab. Now, some of you might be familiar with Lightning and already using it, which is great. Other people might be transitioning across to Lightning. So hopefully this will be a good bit of refreshers about how you move around in Lightning to encourage you to move across to that interface. Just to note that for advice on regulatory or statutory matters, then you do need to seek support from your normal legal channels, as this work here is just intended to be advice on how to use our system to support you. Firstly, we're going to look at configuration that might support reporting on employees who have been recently made redundant and then rehired since the government announced this new scheme. We've got two options that we're outlining here. Firstly, to use any higher reason field that you might have. We've got one on the employment record that we're going to look at modifying, or creating a whole new field to do this. In order to change the fields that are on our object or add new items to our object, we need to go to our object manager, and the way that we do this is through setup. Setup is accessed through the cog in the top right hand corner in Lightning. So if I go into setup, you'll see it opens a new tab for me and I'll see my object manager here in the top. I can either select it from there, or if I don't see the object manager at the top, if I type in object, I can pick up my object manager from the list on the right hand side. I then have a helpful quick find option, so I can look for the object I am seeking to amend, and I'm looking for my employment record object. There it is. Once you're in the employment record, you'll see there's a whole list of navigation options down the left-hand side to go to the bit of the object that you are interested in. We're interested in fields and relationship in this particular stage, and we are looking for a field that already exists called hire reason, which we are going to add a new value for. So reason for hire here. Once we're into our field, we can see it's a pick list field and that we've got a whole load of values here already. We're going to create new to create a new value and choose rehire under job retention. We're going to make sure that this is active and then we're going to choose to save. Now that we've got that new field, that new value on the pick list, we can choose to utilize it. So if we go back to the HCM interface, which we do through the bento box menu, our app selector menu, then we're back into HCM. And if I pick up a team member, so I can either go to the tab or I can use my quick find options on the team member tab. I'm going to pick up an individual called Steve Pendleton, and I'm going to go to his current employment record, and you'll see now that in the field for reason for hire, his previous reason for hire was new role. We're now going to look at the new value we have created there, rehire under retention scheme. The second option we were talking about, if you don't have a hire reason field to adapt, or you want to create an independent field, then we can add a new field. So I'm just going to save Steve's record. I'm going to move back to the object manager through setup, select my object manager and go back to my employment record. Helps if I spell it correctly. There it is. And what we're going to do this time, rather than finding a new field, rather than finding a field that already exists, we're going to create a new field. So this particular field we're going to choose a checkbox because we want a yes or no field. So choose next from the bottom to move us on. The field label is going to be rehire under job retention. So we can pop that in there. We can add a description, rehire under new scheme. And then we can choose on the next step to identify which profiles should view the should be able to view this new custom field. I'm going to make it visible to all. The profiles that you'll have will obviously depend on your organisation, so you might have some slightly different ones there. It then asks us what page layouts we've got, so it shows us available page layouts and it will add it to these automatically, and we can change and move it to a different area on the object if we want to. Okay, so if I go back to HCM Lightning now from my bento box navigation menu and go back into my team member and into his employment record, we can refresh the screen. Sometimes it takes a little while for our new fields to appear. And we can now see that we have the rehire under job retention scheme field, so I can use that checkbox as necessary. Moving on, we're going to create a new absence rule for colleagues who may be shielding or sheltering in place. We're going to create a new absence code on the absence object to do this, so we're going to navigate to setup and our object manager. And from our object manager, we're going to select our absence object. So typing it into the quick find to pick it up nice and easily. We're going to go into our fields and relationships, and we're going to look for an option called reason. There we go. There's our reason field. So we're going to select it and we're going to add a new value to this pick list. So scroll down the screen until you see your new values and click the new button. And we're going to create a new reason of absence, and it's going to be called shielding. I'm just going to copy the value there because I'll need the exact value in just a moment. As I said, it's going to be an absence, and we're going to choose save. Now that we've set up a rule, we can create a new, now that we've set up the reason code rather, we're going to create a new rule with it via our absence accrual pattern. So I'm going to go back to my team member record, and I'm going to pick up my absence accrual patterns tab. If you don't have your absence accrual patterns tab showing, then your bento box menu, your application selector, is where you find them from. So if you start typing the name of the tab you're looking for, and then you can click onto it and find it. If you can't see all of the tabs, all of the absence accrual patterns you want, then change the list view to show all, and all of your patterns should appear. We're going to work with the UK absence pattern, but if you are needing to change this rule for a number of different patterns, then you'll have to manage each of those patterns separately. So now we have the absence accrual pattern open. You can see all of the rules we currently have for this, and we're going to choose to create a new one. The absence accrual pattern name shows up the top. It's type of absence, which is what we wanted, or you could change it if you need, but for this particular one, it's absence. We're going to paste in the name that we just created when we set up the new reason code, so it's exactly correct. In terms of base date, we can leave this blank. It reflects your leave year. It's not strictly needed. And as there's no accrual, we're going to leave the remainder of the fields blank as their default values. If we choose save now, the rule will display under our absence accrual pattern. You'll see we've got a new shielding rule there. As all absence accrual rules need a seniority, we're going to go back into the rule and we're going to find our absence accrual rule seniorities related list. Mine's over here on the right hand side. Some of you might have a related tab here. Wherever it exists from, we can create a new seniority from here. This one doesn't need any particular values in it, just the 0 start, so it knows when the seniority begins, and we're going to choose save. we've now created a new absence accrual seniority, which we can use in WX if our employee needs it. So if I move over to WX, I would do this via the Workforce Experience tab, but I've already got a tab loaded so that I can make the transition quickly. And if I choose to create a new absence for my team member here, you'll see when I get to the reasons, I've got a new absence of shielding. Okay. So I'm going to cancel out of this absence now, and the next element we're going to look at is how we might keep a record of furloughed employees. As many businesses are now having to furlough staff to move them onto the government's job retention scheme, one of the ways to track these statuses and also to manage how the system treats the employee is to create a new employment status. We do this by going to our object manager. I've got a tab open up here with object manager on, and I'm going to look for the team member record, which is where my employment status lives. So if I open up that, go to fields and relationships, and then in the quick find, I can type in status, and it will show me all my statuses, and I can select employment status. It's a pick list field, so if I scroll down and choose a new status and fill in the value that I want, choose save, and I now need to tell the system what I want to do with that new status. And to do this, we need to go into back into the main area of setup and search for installed packages. I've typed installed in the quick find here, and we select, and this shows us all the packages that we have in the system. We're going to find HCM and choose to configure that. And as we scroll down, we'll be able to see the levers section in a moment. There we go. This section tells the system how we want to treat various different employment statuses for people who have left. As the documentation says, depending on what activities you want or what actions you want to happen to employees on furlough status depends where you will put them. I'm going to put them in this is on leave status. I've already added it there, and that will mean that they will be treated in the same way. If we add them as has left, then this will inactivate the user account. So consider if you still want furloughed team members to still have access to the system. If you don't add them to any of these boxes, then it will make no changes at all. If you've made some changes, make sure you save that record. So now we have the means to mark the employee as furlough. But when they're placed on furlough, you may want to store the start and end date of furlough in the Sage People system. So again, that's just going back to the object manager and finding the object on which you want to store those. So probably the employment record. And as we did before, you can go into fields and relationships and look at creating two new fields, one for start date, one for end date, so that you can track those dates in there. We won't go through that directly now, as we've already looked at creating a field. The other thing you might want to consider is what access you have in WX for people who are on furlough. You may not want them to have access at all, but you might want to be providing wellbeing resources or other things through WX and find that useful. One of the things you might want to consider doing, if we pop back to our team members, so we go to team member, and if I pick up Steve Pendleton, we can see what policy Steve's on. So Steve's on UK full HCM policy. If I'm going to furlough Steve and want him to be able to see something different, what I can do is create a clone of this policy and then change some features about it. So I've clicked on the policy link, and it's going to take me directly into that policy, and the option up here in the top right hand corner to clone that particular policy. So I could call this UK full HCM furlough, give it a nice obvious name, and then adjust the different things that I want or don't want Steve to be able to see whilst he's on furlough. So I might want to remove access to compensation planning, objectives, targets, all of those kinds of things, performance review, because obviously people aren't meant to be working whilst they're on furlough. So whatever you want to turn off, you can also turn off absence so that they can't any annual leave or anything like that. So deciding on what you want to turn off on that policy and choose to save the differences. Once you have that, you can then go back into the team members record and you can change the policy which they're associated with. If they've already got a policy override, then make sure you've got a note of that somewhere so that when they come back off furlough, you can put them onto the correct pattern. If when people are either working from home or on furlough and you want them to access the system but they can't access it through single sign-on, then you can provide them with a standard login by going in and changing their email address on their user record to their home email address. Once they've confirmed that email address, you can then reset their password, which will send them a link and allow them directly to log into the system and change the new password. So that's a good option if you're trying to get around single sign-ons. The other thing that you might want to do with furloughed team members, now you've got a new policy, is to change what sort of internal communications that you're going to display to them. So when you set up internal communications in the advanced options, you are able to choose which policies you want to make them active for. So you can specifically target different internal communications for different policies. So those are the main things that the documentation around the furlough and job retention scheme covers. I hope you found this particular run through useful. Just a reminder that if you have changed any statuses or are updating any of those for your team members, just to check your reports are running as you expect them to do. So thinking about what impact any new furlough statuses have on your head count, whether you want to add any of the new fields to snapshot reporting, or whether any of those fields are going to have any impact on your any pay flows that you have set up to feed your payroll. Answers to those questions are going to be individual to each customer's circumstances, so please do contact your customer success manager if you need any further help with that. Thank you all for listening. Bye.